Before we dive in, what time is it where you are right now, and where are you listening from? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. My son turned 7 in a hospital room. I brought a cupcake with a single candle. The nurses sang. He blew it out and asked me if the wish would still count if he was too tired to think of one. I told him of course it would. I told him the wish already knew what he needed. His name is Owen, and for the past 11 months, he has been fighting acute lymphoblastic leukemia with more quiet dignity than any adult I have ever met in my life. I want to tell you what happened to us. Not because I need sympathy. Not because I'm still angry. Though I was, for a long time. I want to tell you because the moment I stopped waiting for someone to rescue me and started moving on my own, everything changed. And I think someone out there needs to hear that today. So let me start at the beginning. I married my husband 6 years ago. His name is Tyler. We met in our late 20s, both working too hard, both thinking we had more time than we did for everything, for travel, for kids, for slowing down. We got married in a small ceremony in Asheville, North Carolina, where I grew up. His family flew in from Connecticut. His mother, who I will call my mother-in-law, wore cream. Not white, she was careful about that, but close enough that 3 people asked me later if I'd noticed. I had noticed. I let it go. That was the first thing I let go. It would not be the last. My mother-in-law is a woman who has spent her entire life arranging things to her satisfaction. Her home, her calendar, her son. She is not loud about it. That's what makes her effective. She says things with a soft voice and a pleasant smile, and by the time you realize what she actually meant, she's already moved on to the next topic. My father-in-law follows her lead in everything. He is not a cruel man on his own, but he has never, not once in the 6 years I knew him, disagreed with her out loud. Tyler is their only son, and they had plans for him that did not fully include me, though they were polite enough never to say so directly. For the first 2 years of our marriage, things were manageable. Tense at holidays, slightly suffocating at family dinners, but manageable. When Owen was born, I thought it might get better. It didn't. My mother-in-law loved Owen the way she loved everything. On her terms, on her schedule, with her preferences front and center. She wanted to be called Grandma Holloway, which was her maiden name, not Tyler's last name, not Owen's last name. I didn't fight that either. I was very good at not fighting things. Owen was 5 when he got sick. It started with bruising, then fatigue so heavy that he'd fall asleep at the dinner table, fork still in his hand, then a fever that wouldn't break. Our pediatrician sent us to the hospital on a Tuesday. By Thursday we had a diagnosis. By Friday I had learned more medical vocabulary than I ever wanted to know. I remember sitting in the college's office, Dr. Whitmore, who has since become one of the people I trust most in this world, and hearing the treatment plan. Induction therapy. Consolidation. Possible bone marrow transplant if the first rounds didn't achieve full remission. Insurance would cover a portion. The rest, she said gently, we would need to plan for. I called Tyler from the parking garage. He came home early. He held Owen for a long time that night, and I heard him crying in the hallway after Owen fell asleep, and I stood on the other side of the wall and didn't go to him because I needed to stay together, and I knew if I touched him I wouldn't. We told his parents that weekend. My mother-in-law listened to everything Tyler said. She nodded in the right places. She asked 1 or 2 questions about the treatment center, and then she said very quietly, "Tyler, you need to think carefully about what this is going to mean for your future." Tyler looked at her. I looked at her. "These situations," she said, folding her hands, "they change people. They change marriages. You're young. You have a career. There are options." I didn't understand what she meant for about 4 seconds, and then I did. She was telling her son to consider leaving. Tyler didn't say anything. That was the moment I should have known. Not that he agreed with her. I don't think he did, not then. But that he sat there and let her say it without a word. I said, "We should get going." I picked up my purse. I took Owen's hand. We drove home in silence. Tyler apologized that night, said she didn't mean it the way it sounded, said she was in shock, said she loved Owen. I let that go too. The next 8 months were the hardest of my life. Owen went through induction chemotherapy. He lost his hair. He threw up so many times that I stopped counting. He developed mouth sores so painful he could barely drink water. I slept in the hospital more nights than I slept at home. I learned how to administer medication through a central line. I learned what numbers on a blood panel meant. I became, out of necessity, a person I didn't fully recognize. Harder, more focused, running on something that wasn't quite adrenaline and wasn't quite love, but was some combination of both that I don't have a name for yet. Tyler was there. I want to be fair. He was at the hospital most evenings. He handled insurance calls, which were their own particular form of torture. He held Owen's hand during infusions, but he also, slowly, started spending more time at his parents' house, started taking calls from his mother in the other room, started coming home later, saying he needed to decompress, that the hospital was too much, that he needed air. I needed air too. I didn't get any. His parents stopped coming to the hospital after the second month. His mother sent flowers once. She called Tyler regularly. She did not call me. When I mentioned this to Tyler, he said she didn't want to overwhelm me. When Owen asked why Grandma Holloway hadn't visited, Tyler said she wasn't feeling well. Owen accepted that. 7-year-olds are more gracious than they should have to be. The moment everything shifted, the moment I stopped being able to pretend, happened on a Wednesday evening in February. I had stepped out of Owen's hospital room to get coffee. Tyler was inside with him. When I came back, the door was cracked open and I could hear Tyler on the phone in the corner of the room, speaking quietly, thinking Owen was asleep. Owen was not asleep. He was watching his father. I stood in the hallway and I listened. "Mom, I know," Tyler said. "I know what you're saying, but I can't just pause, because he's my son." Pause. I'm not going to talk about this here. Pause. I said I'd think about it. Pause. Yes, I know about the account. I understand. He hung up. He turned and saw Owen watching him. He said, "Hey, bud, I thought you were sleeping." Owen said, "Is Grandma Holloway saying bad things about me again?" Tyler said, "What? No, of course not." Owen looked at him for a long moment with those quiet, exhausted eyes of his and said, "It's okay, Daddy. I know I cost a lot of money." My son, my 7-year-old son, who was fighting for his life, had somehow come to understand that his existence was being discussed as a financial liability. I walked away from that doorway. I went to the end of the hall. I stood at the window and looked at the parking lot below, and I made a decision that I have not regretted for a single second since. I was done waiting. I was done softening things. I was done letting it go. I didn't confront Tyler that night. I didn't cry. I didn't say a word. I smiled when I went back into the room. I kissed Owen's forehead. I told Tyler to go get some rest. I watched him leave. And then I started paying attention. I already knew things weren't right with our finances. There was a joint account that had been lower than it should be for months. Tyler's explanation had always been medical costs. I'm handling it. And I had been too exhausted and too focused on Owen to push. I pushed now. I started going through statements. What I found was not embezzlement exactly. It was a pattern. Transfers to an account I didn't recognize. Not enormous amounts, nothing that screamed fraud immediately, but consistent. 300 here, 500 there. Once, 1,200 in a single week. Over 8 months, it totaled just over $9,000, moved out of our joint account into something I had no access to. I didn't say anything to Tyler. I called my cousin Felicia, who is a paralegal in Charlotte. I told her what I'd found. She told me to stop touching the statements, to photograph everything digitally, and to call a family law attorney before I did anything else. I called an attorney named Sandra Pierce. I met with her on a Thursday morning while Owen was in a therapy session at the hospital. She was direct, she was thorough, and at the end of our meeting she said, "Based on what you've brought me, you have a strong case for financial misconduct during marriage. But I want to understand something first. Is there anything, any asset, any account that your husband or his family might not know about on your side?" I almost laughed, because there was, actually. My great-uncle, my grandmother's brother, had passed away 6 weeks earlier. He'd been a quiet man who worked in real estate in South Carolina for 40 years, never married, no children. He had always been kind to me. At his funeral, which I attended alone because Tyler was with Owen and because I didn't ask his family to come, my uncle's attorney had given me a sealed envelope and said it would be explained in the formal reading of the will. I hadn't had time to think much about it since. I was surviving a week at a time. The formal reading was scheduled for the following month. I went. The attorney's name was Mr. Abernathy, and he had an office in Columbia that smelled like old paper and good sense. My great-uncle had left me his investment portfolio, 2 properties, one in Myrtle Beach, one in Greenville, and a sum of liquid assets totaling just over $400,000. I sat in that chair and I did not cry. I nodded. I signed what needed signing. I thanked Mr. Abernathy. I drove to a gas station on the way home and sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes. Tyler did not know, his family did not know, and for the first time in almost a year, I held something in my hands that belonged entirely to me. I called Sandra Pierce from that parking lot. What happened next took 3 months. I want to be honest, it was not a clean process. Sandra filed for legal separation first, which triggered an automatic financial disclosure requirement. Tyler's attorney would have to account for every transfer. The $9,000 would surface, but something else surfaced first. 2 weeks after I filed, Tyler's mother called me directly for the first time in months. She didn't mention the separation, she mentioned Owen. She said she'd been doing research and believed that Owen deserved more stable care given my current emotional state. She said she and my father-in-law had spoken to a family attorney of their own. She said very pleasantly that they intended to petition for visitation rights, potentially more, as grandparents, should Tyler be unable to maintain primary custody. She said, unable to maintain, and I understood that to mean, if we can make her look unfit. I thanked her for calling. I told her I appreciated her concern. I hung up. I forwarded the voicemail. I had recorded it to Sandra immediately. Good, Sandra said when she listened. Very good. The custody hearing was scheduled for a Thursday in April. I want to tell you about the morning of that day because I think it matters. Owen was in an outpatient phase by then. His numbers had responded well enough to move out of inpatient, which was its own kind of miracle. He was home. He was tired, but he was home. That morning he asked me where I was going in my nice clothes. I told him I had a meeting about our future. He said, is it the kind of meeting where things get decided? I said yes. He thought about this and then said, Mom, tell them I'm not a burden. Tell them I'm a person. I held it together until I got to the car. Then I cried for exactly 4 minutes. Then I drove to the courthouse. Tyler's family arrived with their attorney. My mother-in-law wore gray. She looked composed and sympathetic and prepared. My father-in-law sat with his hands folded like he was at church. Tyler sat between his attorney and his mother, and when he saw me, he looked away first. Sandra had prepared thoroughly. The financial records came in first, the transfers, the account, the timeline. Tyler's attorney tried to argue that the money had been moved for investment purposes and that Tyler had intended to disclose it. The judge, a woman named the Honorable Beverly Park, asked Tyler directly why there had been no disclosure during the 11 months of Owen's treatment. Tyler's attorney answered for him. Judge Park asked the question again to Tyler. He said he'd made a mistake. He looked at the table when he said it. Then Sandra introduced the voicemail. My mother-in-law's voice filled the courtroom. Her careful, pleasant tone, her mention of my emotional state, her reference to their intention to petition, every word she had calculated to sound reasonable. In that room, with the transcript on paper in front of a judge, it sounded exactly like what it was. Judge Park looked at her over her reading glasses for a long moment. The grandparent petition was denied. Completely. Judge Park noted in her ruling that there was no evidence of instability in my parenting, that Owen's medical records demonstrated consistent, attentive, appropriate care, and that the petition appeared motivated not by concern for the child's welfare but by an interest in diminishing the primary caregiver's legal standing. She used the word motivated. I wrote it down. Tyler was ordered to repay the transferred funds into a joint account to be supervised during proceedings. He was awarded visitation. not primary custody, visitation, with conditions. His family was not awarded any grandparental visitation rights. I did not celebrate when I walked out of the courthouse. I called Sandra and thanked her. I called Felicia and told her it was done. And then I drove to the hospital, not because Owen had an appointment, but because Dr. Whitmore's office was where I knew how to breathe. Her nurse, a woman named Bonnie who has known Owen since his first week of treatment, gave me a cup of coffee and sat with me for a few minutes without asking me any questions, and I was grateful for that more than I can say. Owen came home from school that afternoon. He'd been back part-time for 6 weeks by then, which was another kind of miracle, and he asked me how the meeting went. I told him things had been decided. He asked if we were okay. I told him yes. He nodded like he'd expected that, like he'd known it would work out, and went to get a snack. His faith in me is the most humbling thing I've ever experienced. In the months since, I've used part of my inheritance to settle Owen's remaining medical balance, which, after insurance, was still significant. I've started the process of transferring the Myrtle Beach property into a trust for Owen. I found a small house to rent in the same school district so he doesn't have to change schools. I've started, slowly, learning how to sleep again. Tyler and I finalized our divorce 4 months after the hearing. It was not dramatic at the end. He signed. I signed. He asked if he could call Owen on his birthday, and I said of course he could, because whatever happened between us, Owen deserves a father who shows up, and I intend to give him every opportunity to be that. Whether Tyler takes those opportunities is up to him. His family has not reached out. I didn't expect them to. I don't wish them harm. I wish them reflection, which is harder to come by and more useful. What I want to say to you, if you've listened this long, is this: there is a kind of silence that looks like weakness. I was silent for a long time. I absorbed things and softened things and let things go. People mistake that silence for passivity, but sometimes that silence is you watching, waiting, learning what you're dealing with. Sometimes it's you gathering everything you're going to need. I had a 7-year-old tell me he knew he cost a lot of money, and I decided right then that the world he was going to grow up in, the one I was going to build for him, was not going to be one where that sentence made sense, where a child measures his worth against a number. I decided that quietly, and I moved quietly, and when I moved, I didn't look back. Owen is in remission. 8 months and counting. He has hair again. It came in a little curlier than before, which he finds very funny. He plays on a modified soccer league for kids who've been through treatment. He made a friend there named Jonah, who also lost his hair, and also has a mother who will move heaven and earth for him, and I think they recognize something in each other immediately. Last week, Owen asked me if I was happy. I thought about it for a real second before I answered. I said, I think I'm getting there. He said, me too. That's enough for now. That's more than enough. If this story stayed with you, I'd love to know. Leave a comment below where you're listening from, what stayed with you, or just say hi. And if you know someone who's carrying something heavy right now and keeping quiet about it, send this to them. Sometimes people need to hear that the quiet ones don't stay quiet forever. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you in the next one. I've thought a lot about what I would tell someone who is in the place I was 2 years ago, standing in a hospital hallway, running on no sleep, watching the person who was supposed to be your partner take phone calls in corners, letting things go because there was simply no energy left to hold on to them and fight at the same time. What I would tell them is this: the way people treat you during the worst moment of your life is not a mistake. It's not shock. It's not poor timing. It's information. And what you do with that information, whether you ignore it or let it quietly settle in and inform your next move, that's where everything begins to turn. My mother-in-law did not say cruel things because she was frightened or overwhelmed. She said them because she had calculated clearly and calmly that Owen was a liability and that I was the obstacle standing between her son and a life she preferred for him. That calculation took a kind of coldness I still don't fully understand. But understanding it wasn't my job. Responding to it correctly was. And here's what I've come to believe about that. When someone shows you that they are willing to look at a sick child and see only cost, they have told you everything you need to know about what they value. You don't argue with that. You don't try to change it. You simply make sure that their values cannot touch your life anymore. That's not revenge. I want to be clear about that. I didn't spend 3 months building a legal case because I wanted to hurt Tyler's family. I did it because Owen told me, in that small, matter-of-fact way that children have when they've been carrying something they shouldn't have to carry, that he knew he costs a lot of money. And I decided that no child, especially not mine, should ever have to measure his right to exist against a number on a hospital bill. That decision required something I didn't know I had until I needed it. It required me to be patient when I wanted to react, precise when I wanted to fall apart, steady when everything around me was moving too fast to track. Those aren't things that come naturally to a person who's been running on fear and exhaustion for almost a year, but they came. Because Owen needed them to come. There's something that happens when you stop waiting to be rescued and start moving your own feet. The fog doesn't lift all at once, but you start to see the next step, and then the one after that. And slowly, the distance between where you are and where you need to be starts to feel crossable. I crossed it, not gracefully, not without crying in parking lots, not without calling Felicia at 11 at night to ask if I was doing the right thing. But I crossed it. Owen is 8 now, he's in remission. He thinks his curlier hair is hilarious. He plays soccer on Saturday mornings and he eats more cereal than any small human should reasonably consume. And he still, occasionally, says things that stop me completely, the way children do when they understand something about life that most adults spend years avoiding. Last month he told me that he was glad we lived in our new house because it felt like ours. He didn't mean it as anything profound. He was just talking. But I've thought about it every day since. It feels like ours. Because it is. Because I made sure it would be. That's the whole story, I think. Not the legal part. Not the courtroom or the voicemail or the will. The real story is a woman who decided that her child's life was worth more than her own comfort, more than keeping the peace, more than continuing to absorb what was being handed to her, who stayed quiet long enough to understand what she was dealing with, and then moved. I hope something in this stayed with you. I hope you'll carry whatever part of it is useful.